life is a wonderful journey, and things that happen to you and you look back, and sometimes they're completely unbelievable. You're looking like, is this really happened to me? I was born in 1956 with a terrible birth defect. My intestines were dead and they didn't work. It means whatever food I took created a lot of problem. And at that time in Soviet Union, it was an incurable disease, and children would live maximum up till the age of 8. And 2 American professors from American Medical School came to Kiev in 1960 and did series of seminars, completely revolutionary, how to do it. And I was the second child that performed this technique surgery. And I was the second child in Ukraine who lived past 8 years. And now I'm going to be 68 next year. I always feel that, the blessing of my ancestors, because my father, my grandfather, my great-grandfather, they were all Protestant ministers. I was named after my grandfather, who was an American missionary. My grandfather came to Russia as an American citizen to the Soviet Union, and he married my grandmother, who was a Russian citizen. But when my father was born and the persecution started, they asked him twice to leave the country. And first time they wouldn't allow him to take his wife and his son, but second time they told him, you can take the whole family and you leave. And when NKVD, KGB people came to his apartment, to kind of look at his personal belongings, one of the officers took him outside and told him, Mr. Vince, it's better for you to leave the country. If you don't leave the country, you will be terribly persecuted. Because in order to stay in the Soviet Union, my grandfather had to change his citizenship. He had to denounce his American citizenship and accepted the Soviet Union. And he was in prison first time, second time, and the third time he was sentenced to death. And after the perestroika and Soviet Union fell down, me and my father went to headquarters of KGB in Moscow on Lubyanka, and we were allowed to see in archives my grandfather's personal file. And in personal file, you can even see, some lower level military guy put in a report that he just shot him that morning, and how he did it. He put him go in the front of him, came from the back, and shot him in the head. And it was even signed the name and everything. My father was sentenced twice, first time 3 years, second time 10 years, and was sentenced in Siberia. And all our family friends, everybody went to jail. They put my grandmother in jail when she was 64 and she had a cancer. For me growing up, going to jail, it's like maybe for some Midwestern Americans go to the army. You go to jail, you learn the life, you build the character, and you become a man. My more political than religious activity started when my father was arrested the second time, because my father was arrested second time when I was 17. Soviet Union was a really closed society. It means we had no information, we had no internet. The only information we were getting was on the ground printing books and something, but it wasn't really books. It was mostly typewriter reprinted books or manuscript. Like Solzhenitsyn, for example, Archipelago Gulaga. Each volume had 600-700 pages. I had 2 typewriters working for me, like for 6 months, typing the Solzhenitsyn, in 6 copies, put together, and we will give Archipelago Gulaga 600 pages to people for 24 hours. it was so valuable, and it was so rare. It means if I had Archipelago Gulag Solzhenitsyn, or I had book Dr. Zhivago by Pasternak, who was a Nobel Prize winner, we would be given 24 hours. And you bring this book, and you bring these things, and you sit down with your adult family, and you read until you finish. You read 600 pages in 24 hours. You do nothing. You just read, because it was like so important. You know, I didn't have any problem with criminals because I entered the jail with a really high level on hierarchy of prison. The only reason that my grandfather was in jail 3 times and was shot to death. My father was serving 10-year sentence in a really high-level security prison in Yakutia. For me, you know, I was young, you know, I was naive or something. But when criminals hear this story, I wasn't just anybody from the street. I was part of the clan, because it's like family tradition. I got a lot of support from criminals. I never got abused. I only was abused by guards. The guard will pass you by, and when you don't expect it, he will hit you in the stomach, and you fall down, and a bunch of them will stand and laugh. And every time they have 12-hour shift, they go through all the cells, checking who is who, what it is. And they will beat you up every 12 hours. It means this is just condition. It means they're not beating you to death, but they beat you enough that you can suffer for a few hours. And I read a lot of Solzhenitsyn. I knew stories from my dad. And I know the only thing that can prevent me from this, if I go on hunger strike. Because when you go on a hunger strike, even in the Soviet jail, it's immediately need to notify the local prosecutor office. It means you go on a special watch. And it's worked. They were coming in every 12 hours, they were screaming, yelling, abusing me verbally, but they didn't touch me at all. Soup we probably have, in a bowl of soup you will find maybe 1-2 small piece of potato and maybe 1-2 pieces of cabbage, and it was all. I really knew 100% that it's just a matter of few months, few years before I would go to jail the second time. Because it's not like you go to jail and you become normal life. You either comply with the government and their policies. If you're against, you're going to spend the rest of your time persecuted. But one day I was walking on the street of Kiev, and the car was passing by, and the door opened and say, "Peter." And you know, I eventually tried to look in, and I was pushed from the back by another guy in the car, and they took me to the forest. And the huge guy, 6 feet tall guys, you know, maybe 250 pounds, maybe like 50 years old, told me he was a colonel of KGB. He was in counterintelligence, and he just wanted me to warn. He says, "You're too young and too stupid to realize what kind of game you're trying to play with us. And we don't play this kind of games with people like you. You know, you can lose everything, including your life." You know, and they were like very serious. But being honest, when you're like 21 years old, you know, and somebody tell you this, and you kind of feel, you know, and I tell them something in the back, and the guy hit me in the face twice, you know, fell on the snow, and they left me like 30 miles outside of the Kiev in the forest that I had to walk. But when I was coming back home at 9 o'clock in the evening, I was approached by a few men. It was a different team. It was the team that were following him. It was the team, that executioner team. And the man approached me and says, "Can you spare like a minute? You know, I need to use a payphone." And I could tell that he was very nervous. And I put money from my pocket, and I was looking in his eyes. I said, "Take it." And he was looking in my eyes without looking here and says, "Oh, you don't have the right change." I was like, "Yes, I do. Take it." And at that time, somebody hit me from the back, and I'm falling down. And the car comes in, and they're trying to, and two big burly guys, like twice my size, started to move me to the car. I was laying on the screen. And I don't know what's happened, this is the kind of marginal situation, days in life. And, I was kind of always intellectual guy, I was a nerd. I was an athlete, I was something. But I was fighting and screaming, I was fighting with my legs, I was twisting, and they were trying to get me, and it was happening like under 1-2 minutes. The military guys, Colonel himself, retired military, with his son, they're working outside doing something. And when they saw through somebody yelling, they looked through the fence, and they see that I was attacked by people. They didn't recognize me, but because it's a private sector and everybody knows each other, it's some kind of people will come and help. And his son took an axe, and man took a shovel, and they started to run toward us, like 9 o'clock in the evening. And these guys realized that it's not going to be a very clean operation, because you have witnesses involved, and maybe somebody will suffer from one or other side. And he grabbed my leg, I was lying on the ground, and he tried to hit my leg with a metal instrument. And it looked like surgery instrument, because it was like a hammer and anything else. It was long metal with 2 little legs. And he hit me in the left leg, and it's kind of when nothing happened. But my right leg, they broke it, and I stayed probably in bed for, I will say, for another like maybe 2 months, 2.5 months, and I was in bed. And later when I recovered, they used to play psychological game with me. Like I will go outside, I will barely walk, and the same man who beat me up that night will start to walk parallel to me on the street, psychological. And suddenly, in one point, they will start to run toward you. Your psyche doesn't work. You will start immediately running away from them, and they will stop laughing. They just kind of play this game. My mom, who was graduate from Kyiv University, and was English teacher in high school. And in that time, it was a very high social level. If you teach English or any language in high school, you're in a good standing. She was fired, and they put a special stamp in her paperwork that she cannot work as a teacher. And at the same time, the negotiations started between President Carter and Chairman Brezhnev about the list of my father. And it took almost 2 years for all the details. Academic Sakharov, who was like the head of the movement, and he and his wife really help us. They help us with my father's case, they help us. And because maybe of this involvement, my father's name became so well known in the West, and especially in United States, that President Jimmy Carter, when he was going to become a president, he promised to his friends and followers that when he becomes a president, he would negotiate with Soviet government the release of my father. And it did happen. It means this is the President Carter and Rosalind Carter who were instrumental in bringing our family here, and they were they were literally our sponsor. They were our U.S. ties when he came. And my father met President Carter next day after he arrived from Soviet jail. And we came to United States, and being honest with you, everything was so different. It's like stepping on the moon. It was so different. Crossing the street was different. Going to the supermarket store is different. I remember many years later where my aunt came to visit us from Soviet Union. When Soviet Union collapsed, she came to visit us. And she went first time to the local supermarket. She was crying for a few hours. She couldn't believe that you can have 20 different type of butter. Of course, going to the American university was very different too. the way you study, the way you go to the lecture. It's much more individual work, it's much more responsibility. And in Soviet Union everything was more controlled and was given, like you given textbooks and you just given the test. And going to Ivy League school with 1 year of English wasn't enough. And being honest, when I have people coming from prep school who could write the paper, smoking cigarettes and drinking beer, and they will write a beautiful paper in 40 minutes. It will take me 5-6 days. When I was really down and I was really depressed and I need to hit the bottom and go up, I started doing at Dartmouth. I will go to the local flower shop where I was the only student who had an account. It means I didn't have to pay this, bill me once a month. I will buy a big bouquet of roses. I will take it proudly on the street and go for me. And the first woman who smiled at me, young, old, whatever, I will give her flowers. I came to apply for a job. He had only one job opening position. It was a dishwasher. And he really liked me, Bob, and he was like my cultural navigator in the United States. And he looked at me and says, do you really want to work? Yeah. Well, have you ever worked in US? No, I only work like in a student cafeteria. Wow, it doesn't count. Okay, do you know what this American dream is? Oh yeah, everybody can become millionaire. No. Would you like me to teach you how to become millionaire? Bob asked me. I look with him, big disbelief, is like, well, tell me the story, I will see what the story is. And he says, it's very simple. I'm hiring you as a dishwasher. And you don't have to do whatever expected from you. You have to be such a good dishwasher that everybody in the restaurant, from waitresses to the chef and to the other worker, will come and says, Bob, we never had such a good dishwasher. Like, Peter is the best dishwasher we ever had. And he says, if you pass the first exam and you're going to be the best dishwasher I ever had in 6 months, I'm going to promote you. That I learned much more from working in a local diner for Bob Watson than going to Dartmouth. And I ended up in the restaurant business, something I knew. It means, and I became a management and trainee, did everything. And in 2.5 years after graduation, in 1987, I was already general manager of 200-room hotels. When the Soviet Union collapsed, I had so much adrenaline coming to my head. I couldn't sit still. It's like, I have to go back. I have to try to do something, because it's so many things. It was like a pioneer West. You just go to the West, there is a gold mine, and everybody can succeed. I started in Moscow company from one person, myself, and doing logistics and freight forwarding. First of all, I did for US Embassy. You send the truck, and you send a guy with Kalashnikov something. If you send a truck without Kalashnikov, your cargo 99% will be stolen. Bribe was everything, especially at the custom clearance. When you go to custom clearance, even if your paperwork was 100% in order, you have all the letter, all the permission, they can do it in 2 hours, or they can do it in 3 days. When I realized I was adrenaline junkie, because life in the Soviet Union, it's never goes smooth. It's always up and down. One day you're close to death, next day you're close to heaven. I live in a building where a lot of military people live, and I could see the military start to evacuate their families. And I knew one of the bodyguards of one of the generals, and I came to him and said, how's the situation? And he says, very bad, very bad. He says, we have, the way the Russian advance, we will have them in Kiev in 48 hours. And I came to my family and I told them just yesterday that no, we're staying here, we will see how things going, etc. And I came to them, it's like, we're packing, we're leaving. And we pack everything, all the food. I had a refrigerator full of food. I give to the concierge and to the parking lot attendant, and we just packed in the car, and we went from Kiev to Lviv. And when we came to the border, we realized that the line was 29 kilometers. It's probably maybe 20 miles line of cars to get to the border. We stayed for 6 hours, and we realized that in 6 hours we did only 500, I don't know, half a mile. And we realized if we have 20 miles and we did half a mile, it means we have to be here for a week or two. and this is in a field, on the middle of nowhere. It means you have no bathroom facilities, you have no water, you have no coffee, you have no food stores because you're just in the middle of nowhere. And I started to analyze all the border crossing from Ukraine, Romania, Moldova, Poland, Czech Republic. We went almost on the border with Belarus, where all the Russian troops were concentrated. This means we were driving there and people were driving toward us. Nobody was going this way. And we ended up staying on the border only 24 hours. Decided to find a hotel, and we couldn't. Everything was booked. We went to 5 different hotels, woke up the staff, nobody had any rooms, and we were like, what we're going to do, because we were so tired after staying at the border for 24 hours, not sleeping. Us driving to Warsaw, which was another 4 hours, was too dangerous because I couldn't drive, I was so tired. Finally, we found hotels that had 1 room without heat, and it was really cold. It was below freezing, and without saying, and she's like, I can give you room, but it's no heat. Can you sleep in that room? With no problem, and we just put all the clothes on us, put hats, got under blanket, put the dog with us to keep us warm, and this is the way we survived. And next day we went to Warsaw. And this was our escape from Ukraine. I think it's very important for Ukraine that United States and Europe understand that this is not just our war, it's a war for democracy. I'm a refugee, I have no pension, I have no savings, they're all back at home in Ukraine. I'm 67 and I have to work to pay my bills. Even when I started to work at Catholic Charities, I was working as a waiter for the first 6 months, but doing 2 jobs is a little bit tough. I can help somebody, if I can do something positive, I get this as a boomerang, it's come back to me. Every time I do good, it's always come back to me. When I got an offer to work at Catholic Charities, I was a little bit scared, maybe much more than little. And the reason is because the last 30 years I worked for myself. The way the team took me in and the way people treat me, I have found second home. Really good team, good people, and a good cause. And when you look at the people, our clients, refugees, and you see the achievements they have done in 6 months, you realize that we're doing something good.